Hey, this is Matt with Motu. Just wanted to follow up here in regards to your M Audio keyboard with Performa Lite. So after doing a little bit more investigation on this particular product, your M Audio, it's not going to be as easy as just kind of connecting the M Audio to the computer and that's it. It looks like M Audio supports something called Direct Link, which is almost looks like a protocol that interfaces with specific DAWs to kind of map everything out for you. Though Digital Performer is not one of those respective DAWs. Uh, so what you may want to do, just starting off, is to connect with the folks at M Audio and see if they would be able to implement or kind of get the ball rolling for this direct link option with Digital Perform, because again, doesn't look like it's part of that supported DAW environment. That being said, one thing that the keyboard does support, and I encourage you to read the manual to get more familiar with this, is general CC MIDI messages, MMC, all that good stuff. What that means is that it looks like from the majority of the controls on this keyboard controller, that they would be assignable via some sort of MIDI command or MIDI message to whatever that may be. Since that's the case, what you're going to have to do is be very intentional about doing some assignments here when it comes to the different buttons and functions that you want to program on your keyboard. So I wanted to go over a couple things just to kind of show you how you might go about this with certain commands in Performer Lite so that you can kind of get started and start to piece this thing together. So to start, I'm going to focus on the transport controls because that's a pretty important aspect of like using a keyboard controller with any sort of DAW. As you can see, you have things like stop, start, all that good stuff. So one way that you can assign MIDI messages to transport controls is via the setup menu and in commands. When you open that up, it's going to give you a giant list of commands that you can use. And what you're going to have to do is find the specific commands that are associated with these transport buttons up here so that you can map them with the physical buttons that you have on your controller. So as an example, let me just find play, for example. So I'm going to type in play here. This is the command I'm looking for. You can see that there is no MIDI assignment for it, but there is a number key. So in your case, what you would need to do is make sure that the M Audio is connected to your computer, powered on. Once that's done, go to commands, find play, just like we've done here, and then click on this MIDI event column. That's going to open up, start flashing. And what you should be able to do is press the play button on your M Audio keyboard controller. And in theory, what should happen is that it should populate some sort of MIDI event in this window. And then you would see like whatever it is right here. You would also see that the source is set to something here. So what you could do is click on this and make sure it's set to M Audio. But that's it. Then in theory, what should happen is that when you press the play button on the transport controller on the actual keyboard, it should play Performer Lite. And then what you'd have to do from then on out is essentially just find the other commands like, stop, which is this one, do this, press the stop button, see if it populates a MIDI event, and vice versa, all the way down. And that would just, again, be for the keyboard transport controls like stop, start, rewind, all that good stuff. For what it's worth, you also need to you might need to make sure that master is checked as well. When it comes to some of the other aspects of this controller, though, that's going to be a little bit different. So for faders and pads, that is dependent on what you're attempting to control in Performer Lite. So the pads, for example, are likely either going to be sending some sort of CC message out or a MIDI note. And if that's the case, it depends on what you want to use those pads for. So if it's just like an instrument, like a drum machine or something, just hitting the pads while the drum machine is active should likely trigger those respective sounds that are in the drum machine, though you have to make sure you know what notes are assigned to what. so that you can trigger the correct sounds. That's a little bit more detailed, and first approaching this type of workflow, it can be a little confusing, so let me know what your intention is for those drum pads. For the faders, it's kind of in the same wheelhouse as the pads to some degree, but I want to show you a trick here. So I'm going to create a couple MIDI tracks. It looks like this keyboard controller has 9 faders, so let me just make 9 tracks here. So that's 5. Great, so we have 9 MIDI tracks here. I'm going to go to the mixing board, and what you should be able to do is to assign the faders on the physical controller to your virtual faders in Performer Lite by attaching MIDI controllers. So what you can do is you can right click on a fader, so let's say fader 1, and then hit attach MIDI controller. That's going to start flashing. And then what you should do is move the fader on the keyboard, the M audio, the first fader, and it should link up to this fader. And then you can kind of rinse and repeat for each of these faders for your physical faders. And that should give you some sort of control there. Though keep in mind that you're attaching the specific fader on your keyboard controller to that specific MIDI track. So if you have more than 9 MIDI tracks, then you're going to have to do some manual reassigning. Because Performer Lite doesn't automatically link up with this controller. So I think these are good pieces of information to start to kind of get the ball rolling. We haven't quite dived into detail on how to do things specifically because I don't have all the information in terms of how you want to use this controller. But it's going to take some manual labor to get this to kind of work as I think you expect it to in Performer Lite. And again, I think that's just because the M Audio company does not support this direct link feature in Performer Lite and vice versa. So going back to the first thing I recommended, if you can get in touch with M Audio and recommend this as a feature request to them, see if they can test Performer Lite or even Digital Performer, that would be great to have that kind of direct access, because that's going to allow you to, hopefully if they implement that in the future, just plug up your keyboard and everything's pre-assigned. There's really nothing that you need to do manually. So take a look at this video when you can. Let me know if you have any questions, of course, and we'll go from there.